My name is Kayla. I graduated from college 5 years ago and moved out to live on my own when I started college. I did this because my father was a strange person. I was his first child, and he had wanted a son. When I was born a girl, he didn't hide his disappointment and was hard on my mother. As I grew up, my father never accepted me as his daughter and didn't show me any love. I don't have any happy memories of my father from my childhood. All I remember are his cold eyes and the many times he rejected me with his words. My mother protected me and loved me, even taking on the role of both parents. Because of her, I was able to get through my father's harsh treatment. 6 years later, Emery was born. My father was disappointed again that it was a girl, but this time, something changed, and he began to adore Emery. However, his attitude toward me didn't change. It was clear that he treated Emery and me very differently. As I went through elementary, middle, and high school, my father treated me like I didn't exist. On the other hand, he praised Emery for even the smallest things and bragged about how cute she was, like a little doll. In contrast, when he talked about me, he would sigh and say things like, "But Kayla, this was hard for me." My mother would comfort me, saying, "Kayla is different from Emery, but she's very cute too." But it didn't make me feel any better. My confidence was shattered. When I went to college, I decided to move out and live on my own. I loved my mother, but I had no feelings for my father, who never showed any interest in me. I couldn't stand living with him anymore. He paid for my college admission reluctantly but said he wouldn't help with tuition or living expenses. He made it clear that any money would go to Emery instead. I had to work hard, taking part-time jobs and earning scholarships to pay for everything. My college life was filled with studies and work, and I didn't have time for the normal joys of being young. During my student days, I barely kept in touch with my family. My mother would occasionally contact me, but there was no communication from my father or Emery, and I didn't reach out to them either. After graduation, when I was looking for a job, the most important thing for me was the salary. I had to pay back half of the scholarship I received, and from my part-time jobs, I knew how important income was. With a recommendation from my senior professor and my determination during the interviews, I was able to get an offer from my top choice, a global consulting firm. My mother was thrilled, as if it was her own achievement, but my father and Emery didn't react at all. I thought I was ready for that, but it still left me feeling lonely and empty. I realized that finding peace and happiness isn't easy. I threw myself into my work once I joined the company. I needed a place to channel all my frustration and lingering feelings. Because of that, I was able to learn the job faster than my peers. With help from my seniors, I was able to satisfy major clients and secure long-term contracts. I was steadily climbing the career ladder, and my income grew as I achieved more. 5 years into my career, I had become a leader, trusted with multiple projects. During this successful time, I received a call from my father, someone I hadn't heard from in years. He said, "Your mother had an accident and is paralyzed on one side. I want you to come home and take care of her. You're probably just sitting around, so I'll give you a task." I was shocked to hear about my mother's accident and that she needed care. I hadn't told my father about my job, so he thought I was unemployed and useless. But more than that, I was deeply worried about my mother's condition. I didn't want to go back home, but my desire to help my beloved mother was stronger. I quickly applied to work remotely at my company. Luckily, my global company was ahead of others in offering telework, so the environment was already in place. I decided not to cancel the lease on my current apartment. Even though it seemed wasteful to pay rent while I was away, I thought it might be best to keep it. So, I returned to my family home, taking only what I needed. It had been about 9 years since I left for college. When I saw my mother's condition, I realized it was worse than I had thought. She was paralyzed on one side and couldn't walk by herself. Fortunately, her mind was still clear, and she could speak normally, but her immobile body was clearly causing her pain. I confronted my father about why he hadn't contacted me in the several months since my mother's accident and needed care. He was as indifferent as ever, saying, "Telling you wouldn't make her better. I called you this time because I had no choice." While it was true, I wasn't a doctor and couldn't help my mother recover. I couldn't believe that a father would keep his daughter in the dark for months about her mother's condition. The house was in terrible shape, clothes were scattered everywhere, dishes were piled up in the sink, and the rooms were covered in dust and garbage. My mother's care had been completely neglected, and her back was covered in bed sores. I didn't expect much from my father, but I was shocked that Emery, who was also supposed to be living there, hadn't done anything either. When I asked Emery what she had been doing, her response was, "I can't do housework, so I can't take care of mom either. I'm relieved now that Kayla's back. Emery, who had been spoiled growing up, had become a selfish person who couldn't do anything around the house. I started by cleaning the rooms. The mess and dirt that had built up over several months couldn't be fixed in one day, so it took me nearly a week to clean everything. During that time, I also had to take care of my mother. She kept apologizing for having me care for her, but I tried to cheerfully attend to her, hoping she would feel better. Throughout all this, neither my father nor Emery helped at all. In fact, my father complained about the food, saying it tasted awful. My father constantly criticized me, saying things like, "What are you slacking off for? You're so clumsy at taking care of your mother. You have plenty of time since you're just loafing around. Do it properly." To him, it was completely natural that I should handle all the housework and caregiving. Emery also treated me like a servant. She'd say, "Kayla, wash my clothes for me. I need them for school tomorrow." Or, "Kayla, can you make me some tea?" I felt like I was being treated as if I were invisible, especially by my father, who thought I was just a shut-in, even though I mostly stayed in my room doing remote work, housework, and caring for my mother. To my father, it seemed like I was doing nothing at all. Although my main job was remote, I still had to go into the office sometimes. When I came home, my father would often be standing by the door, angry, accusing me, "You're just a shut-in neat, and yet you're out gallivanting around. Take care of the house properly." From behind him, Emery would chime in, "You're really useless, just going out to play." I felt exhausted. Every time I left the house to go to work, I would be met with insults and sarcasm from both of them. To escape, I made it a habit to go to my kept apartment and relax there, tidying up the room before heading back home. I was truly grateful that I had kept that apartment. The unreasonable demands and harsh treatment from my father and Emery only grew stronger day by day. My father, who made me work so hard, now started demanding money from me. "You must have some savings, even if you're a neat. Contribute to the household," he said. Meanwhile, Emery, who did nothing to help around the house, asked me for money too. "I'm going on a day trip with my friends, so give me some funds." I started to wonder what I was to these people, certainly not a daughter or a sister. The painful days continued. Then one time, Emery screamed, "My ring is gone. Kayla, do you know where it is?" Of course, I didn't. I had no idea where Emery's ring was, and I wasn't interested in it since our tastes were completely different. When I told her I didn't know, she stormed into my room. I was slow to react to Emery's sudden action, and by the time I followed her, I could already hear her triumphant voice from inside the room. "See, here's the ring. Kayla stole it, didn't she?" Emery came out of the room, holding the ring, pointing her finger at me and shouting. There was no way that ring had been in my room. I immediately realized that Emery had set a trap for me as some sort of punishment for not giving her pocket money. She quickly ran to tell my father, who had just come home. "Stealing Emery's things? You're truly pathetic," he yelled. I don't remember raising a daughter who would steal. No matter how much I explained, my father wouldn't believe me. Emery added, "We don't need a thief. Kayla, if it weren't for your mother's care, I'd kick you out right now. Have some shame." And just like that, I was labeled a thief. One evening at dinner, my father suddenly became furious for reasons I didn't understand. "You useless person, can't even do housework properly, making food like this, and still not contributing money to the house. Do you think your current work is enough? You're just a shut-in who gallivants around. I can't stand it anymore. I'll destroy your plaything," he shouted, and then he headed toward my room. My plaything was my computer, my essential work tool. If it were destroyed, it would be a disaster. I followed my father to my room and protected my computer just as he was about to lay his hands on it. Emery stood behind him, watching and smirking. Around this time, I felt my mind and body reaching their limits. That's when my mother passed away peacefully. She had always been grateful for my care and was pained by how my father and Emery treated me. I felt my strength draining, and my heart was so shattered that I forgot to cry. My father and Emery, however, showed no tears. They acted as though a nuisance had been removed. Though we were all in the same tearless situation, our reasons were completely different. After my mother's funeral, which was held quietly, my father called me into the living room. "Your mother's gone, and you're no longer needed," he said coldly. "I want you to leave immediately. We don't need a useless neat who can't even contribute money to the house," my father said. I had a feeling he would say something like this, but I never thought it would actually happen. I tried to assert how hard I had worked until now, but my father was firm about me leaving. Emery added, "Are you planning to stay here and be a neat? You're such a parasite. A parasite, that's a good word. You're like a tick or a flea. The barrage of harsh words made me feel dizzy. Then my father said, "And about your mother's inheritance, you must renounce it. There's nothing for you." I hadn't even thought about my mother's inheritance. The love she had given me was enough, something I had never received from my father or Emery. "I don't want it. I'll renounce it. And I'll leave," I replied. "Okay, I'll leave right away." I asked for one day to pack my things and immediately began preparing. The next day, my father said, "Are you ready to move? Hurry up, I'm leaving. I'll have nothing to do with this house or you two anymore. Goodbye." I loaded my packed belongings into the taxi I had called. As I looked at my few possessions, I realized how little I had. Returning to my parents' house after 9 years, and leaving again, this time for good, I had spent so much time feeling empty, realizing the harsh reality of my father and Emery, but I was satisfied knowing that I had helped my mother. I returned to my kept apartment and applied to switch from telework to regular work. I was glad I had kept that apartment. My old daily life returned, but now I worked even harder than before. I wanted to forget everything about what had happened. 3 months later, I received a call from my father, with whom I had cut ties. I didn't want to answer, but I reluctantly picked up the phone. "Hey, what's this promissory note? It's an outrageous amount, isn't it? Are you a NEET? How much are you earning a month?" My father fired questions at me one after another. Of course, I wasn't a NEET. On the contrary, thanks to my dedication to my job, I knew my income was considerably higher than most people my age. I had also accumulated quite a bit of savings from working. When I first started caring for my mother, I bought various equipment and tools to improve her environment. Knowing that the household was financially strained, I also contributed to the monthly living expenses to ease my mother's burden. Long before my father demanded money for the house, I had been giving financial support. I even paid for Emery's tuition to relieve my mother's worries. My mother, grateful for my contributions, insisted on making it official by having a promissory note drawn up between us. My financial support had amounted to a considerable sum, and that promissory note became a form of negative inheritance for my father and Emery. As for me, I was exempt because I had already renounced the inheritance. In other words, my father and Emery had to repay all the money I had contributed. After explaining everything to my father, he was speechless. He screamed that he would also renounce the inheritance, but by that time, both he and Emery had already benefited from it, so they no longer had the right to do so. "Work hard and pay it back properly, and don't contact me anymore. I've cut ties with you," I told him. I ignored his ranting, hung up the phone, and blocked his calls. Later, my uncle, my mother's brother, caused a great deal of trouble for my father and Emery. I hadn't seen him for a while, but we reconnected at my mother's funeral. After noticing something was wrong with me, I confided in him. The family home was owned by my uncle, and my mother had been renting it. The right to rent passed to my father and Emery through inheritance, but my uncle refused to renew the lease. Legally, tenants have the upper hand, but my father and Emery couldn't stand up to my uncle. Because of their actions, they had to leave. My father, who had been on the restructuring list at his company for some time, was finally selected for it and lost his job. Emery, unable to pay tuition, had to drop out. Even though she was close to graduating, father and Emery, who lost their home and jobs, moved into a small apartment. Most of my father's retirement money went toward repaying the debt to me. At his age, it would be difficult for him to find another job, and whether Emery, a college dropout, could get a decent job was also uncertain. The two of them were becoming NEETs in a small, dark room. On the other hand, thanks to my hard work, I succeeded in acquiring new clients and launching new projects. I was promoted to the first female division head at my company, though it's a bit late for a global company to have its first female division head. I'm striving to nurture the next generation and make the company more open and inclusive. I decided not to cancel the lease on my apartment, even though it felt wasteful to pay rent while I was staying at my family home. I thought it might be better to keep it. So, I returned to my parents' house, taking only what I needed. It had been 9 years since I left for college. When I saw my mother, I realized her condition was worse than I had thought. She was paralyzed on one side and couldn't walk on her own. Luckily, her mind was still sharp, and she could speak normally, but her immobile body caused her a lot of pain. I asked my father why he hadn't contacted me in the months since my mother's accident and care had become necessary. He was as indifferent as ever, saying, "Telling you wouldn't make her better. I called you now, because I had no choice." While I knew I wasn't a doctor and couldn't help my mother recover, I couldn't believe that a father would keep his daughter in the dark about her mother's condition for so long. The house was in a terrible state, clothes were scattered all over, dishes were piling up in the sink, and the rooms were full of dust and garbage. My mother's care had been completely neglected, and she had bed sores on her back. I didn't expect much help from my father, but I was shocked to find that Emery, who was also living there, hadn't done anything either. When I asked Emery what she had been doing, she said, "I can't do housework, so I can't take care of Mom." I'm relieved now that Kayla's back. Emery, who had been spoiled growing up, had become a selfish person who couldn't help around the house. I started cleaning the rooms. The mess and dirt from several months couldn't be fixed in one day, so it took me nearly a week to clean everything. During that time, I also took care of my mother. She kept apologizing for having me take care of her, but I tried to stay positive and hoped she would feel better. Throughout all of this, neither my father nor Emery helped at all. In fact, my father complained about the food, saying it was awful.